In May 2025, something happened that quietly shook the global trade system. A freight train, fully loaded with goods, left the city of Xi'an in China, and just 15 days later, it rolled into Iran's Aprin dry port. 10,000 kilometers of railway, cutting across mountains, deserts, and borders, had officially opened for business. And when that same train returned to China half a month later, carrying 50,000 barrels of crude oil, it wasn't just a shipment, it was a statement. For decades, China's energy lifeline depended almost entirely on the sea, long, vulnerable routes passing through U.S.-controlled choke points like the Strait of Malacca, the Strait of Hormuz, and the Suez Canal. Any disruption there could paralyze China's energy flow and slow its economy overnight. But now, this new overland railway has changed the equation completely. What once took over a month by sea now takes just over 2 weeks by rail, faster, safer, and beyond the reach of U.S. naval power. For Washington, this is more than an infrastructure project. It's a strategic nightmare. Because this single line of steel means China can now trade directly with the Middle East and even Africa, without ever touching the oceans that the U.S. dominates. The story of this railway didn't start overnight. It began more than a decade ago, back in 2013, when China first launched its grand vision known as the Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI. The goal was, well, simple but ambitious, to connect Asia, Europe, and Africa through a modern network of trade routes, both by sea and by land. Iran, sitting right at the crossroads of the Eurasian continent, was a natural partner. It bridges Central Asia, the Middle East, and Europe, making it a perfect link between East and West. But at that time, the idea of a direct railway between China and Iran was really more of a dream than a plan. The distance was massive, over 10,000 kilometers, crossing multiple countries, each with different railway standards, political systems, and terrains. Still, China pushed forward. The first step came in 2016, when a test train traveled from Xi'an to Tehran. The journey took 18 days, which was a remarkable achievement back then. But honestly, it was largely symbolic. The route wasn't ready for large-scale operations. Many sections were disconnected and track gauges differed from country to country, creating all sorts of logistical headaches. The real turning point came in 2021, when China and Iran signed a 25-year comprehensive cooperation agreement worth $400 billion. This deal wasn't just about oil or trade, it was a blueprint for deep, long-term collaboration in energy, infrastructure, and finance. Most importantly, it reignited the dream of a fully connected China-Iran railway. Throughout that year, railway officials from China, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, and Iran held frequent meetings to iron out every obstacle, from track compatibility to customs procedures. Meanwhile, Iran was racing to complete missing sections, including the Rasht-Caspian Railway, which would connect its northern region to Central Asia. By June 2024, that final piece fell into place, and less than a year later, in May 2025, the project was ready. On May 24th, a freight train loaded with Chinese goods departed from Xi'an and reached Iran's Aprin dry port just 15 days later. The event marked not only the opening of a railway, but really the beginning of a new trade era. Then came the symbolic return trip. 50,000 barrels of Iranian crude oil shipped back to China on the same tracks. For the first time, oil was flowing from the Middle East to East Asia without touching the U.S.-controlled seas. But this wasn't just about efficiency, it was about strategy. China had just built a land bridge across Eurasia, one that bypasses every choke point America controls. And this breakthrough changed the rules of global trade. For decades, one of America's greatest strategic advantages has been its control over global sea routes, especially the Strait of Hormuz and the Strait of Malacca. These two narrow passages handle the majority of the world's oil trade. Any nation that wants to move energy across Asia usually has to pass through them. and both are under the heavy watch of the U.S. Navy. This has given Washington enormous leverage. If tensions rise, it can pressure countries, even without direct confrontation, simply by threatening to restrict access or by increasing naval patrols. Nations like Iran, China, and Russia have long seen this as a major vulnerability. That's what makes the China-Iran Railway so revolutionary. It effectively bypasses the U.S.-controlled seas and creates a land-based lifeline for energy and trade between the Middle East and East Asia. Instead of sending oil through tankers vulnerable to sanctions or blockades, Iran can now ship energy overland, straight through Central Asia, to China's industrial heartland. This changes the entire power dynamic. Think of it this way. Before, Iran's oil exports were like a river flowing through a narrow canyon guarded by American warships. Now, that same river has found a new underground channel. Hidden, secure, and unstoppable. For China, the benefits are equally massive. Around 80% of its imported oil still passes through the Malacca Strait, a choke point that the U.S. could easily block in a conflict. With this new railway, China is reducing its dependence on that route, strengthening its energy security and strategic independence. The timing is also no coincidence. In recent years, Washington has intensified sanctions on Iran, tightened export controls on China, and sought to limit their energy cooperation. But the land corridor between Xi'an and Tehran makes many of those sanctions harder to enforce. Goods, energy, and even advanced equipment can now move by train, away from U.S. radar and outside of maritime surveillance zones. In other words, the U.S. can't just cut off this supply chain the way it can with sea routes. Once the trains are moving, they're beyond American control. And for Iran, a country that's been economically strangled for years, this is a major lifeline. It allows Tehran to export oil, petrochemicals, and manufactured goods directly to Asian markets, while importing technology and equipment from China in return. The result? A powerful economic artery that runs across the heart of Eurasia, one the U.S. can't easily touch. But the impact of this railway goes far beyond China and Iran. It's transforming the balance of trade across the entire region, connecting Central Asia, the Caucasus, and even parts of Europe into a single land-based economic network. What's happening across Eurasia right now is nothing short of historic. For centuries, global trade revolved around the oceans, from the Silk Road's decline to the rise of European colonial empires that dominated the seas. But today, the old pattern is reversing. The land routes are coming back, and they're changing the global balance of power in real time. The China-Iran Railway is not just a single line between two countries. It's a core link in the larger Belt and Road Initiative, China's trillion-dollar vision to connect Asia, Europe, and Africa through railways, highways, and energy pipelines. Together, these routes form what analysts now call the Eurasian Economic Corridor, a vast network that allows goods to move from Shanghai to Istanbul or from Tehran to Moscow without ever touching an ocean controlled by the U.S. Navy. To understand the scale of this transformation, imagine this. A container that once took 45 days to ship by sea from China to Europe can now make the same journey in less than 18 days by rail. That's not just faster, it's strategically safer. No pirates, no naval blockades, no dependency on U.S. protected waters. And this overland network isn't just about transportation. It's about creating new power centers in places that were once considered in-between regions. Central Asia, the Caucasus, and parts of Eastern Europe. Countries like Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Azerbaijan are now becoming critical hubs for logistics, trade, and energy. Railways, pipelines, and fiber optic cables are turning these former buffer zones into economic crossroads. For example, Kazakhstan's dry port at Khorgos on the Chinese border has transformed into one of the busiest inland trade hubs in the world. Trains stop there to transfer containers between Chinese and European rail gauges, a process that really symbolizes a literal and strategic handoff between East and West. Meanwhile, in Iran, cities like Mashhad and Tehran are seeing a resurgence of industrial activity thanks to the new rail link. These are not isolated developments. They are part of a coordinated shift in global logistics that could, over time, reduce Western dominance over international trade. Even Russia plays a key role here. Despite Western sanctions, Moscow remains a vital connector in this network, offering rail access from Asia into Europe through the Trans-Siberian route and the North-South Transport Corridor, another land bridge linking Russia, Iran, and India. In short, the Eurasian Economic Corridor is not just a trade project, it's a geopolitical reordering. For the first time in modern history, Eurasia, the massive landmass that holds 70% of the world's population and resources, is building its own integrated economy, largely outside U.S. influence. But to make this vision truly sustainable, one key ingredient is still needed: energy security. And that's exactly where China and Iran's next move comes in, a deal that could permanently alter the balance of global energy power. Energy has always been the lifeblood of modern civilization, and whoever controls it controls power itself. For China and Iran, this reality has driven them into one of the most strategically significant partnerships of the 21st century, the China-Iran Energy Alliance. It all started taking shape in March 2021 when Beijing and Tehran signed a 25-year comprehensive cooperation agreement worth an estimated $400 billion. The deal wasn't just about oil. It was about redefining the global energy map. Under this long-term pact, China would invest heavily in Iran's infrastructure, technology, and manufacturing sectors, while securing a steady flow of discounted oil and gas from Iran for decades to come. To put it simply, China gains energy security, a constant, reliable supply of fuel that can't be easily blocked by U.S. sanctions, and Iran gains economic survival and technological development. It's a perfect example of strategic interdependence. Each side gives the other what it needs most. For Iran, which has faced years of economic isolation under Western sanctions, this deal was nothing short of a lifeline. China's investments help modernize Iran's outdated refineries, expand its rail and port networks, and strengthen its energy export systems. In return, Iran provides what China's booming industries crave: cheap, abundant oil. And here's the game changer. These transactions increasingly happen outside the U.S. dollar system. Instead of using SWIFT or American-controlled banking networks, China and Iran are trading in local currencies or using digital payment channels linked to China's yuan-based financial system. That means Washington can no longer switch off Iran's economy at will by cutting off its banks. This isn't just an economic move, it's a geopolitical shield. Every yuan-denominated oil transaction chips away at the dominance of the petrodollar, the foundation of U.S. global financial power since the 1970s. If more countries, from Saudi Arabia to Russia, start trading oil in yuan or local currencies, it could slowly erode the dollar's special status as the world's default reserve currency. For China, this alliance also ties directly into its Belt and Road strategy. The new rail links and energy pipelines with Iran provide a secure inland corridor that's immune to U.S. naval control. Oil can move overland instead of by sea, from Iran's fields straight into China's refineries, fast, safe, and sanction-proof. Meanwhile, Iran gets access to Chinese technology and investment that were once blocked by Western sanctions. This includes everything from telecommunications and 5G networks to renewable energy and nuclear power cooperation. In short, China is helping Iran build the infrastructure it needs to thrive independently, while gaining a crucial partner in the most energy-rich region on Earth. This growing cooperation has also pulled other nations into its orbit. Countries like Russia, Saudi Arabia, and even Pakistan are watching closely, exploring similar yuan-based energy deals. The more this model spreads, the more it weakens America's ability to use economic pressure as a geopolitical weapon. But this alliance is not just about money and oil. It represents something deeper. It's the merging of two civilizations that have both felt encircled by the West and are now choosing to carve out their own path. A path that could reshape the balance of global power for generations. And yet, despite all these changes, one question remains. How far can this new order go before it truly challenges U.S. dominance?